I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Egypt to introduce an address by the head of state.
السيد الرئيس.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce to you an address by His Excellency Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, President of the Arab Republic of Egypt, for the general debate during the 75th session of the General Assembly. I thank you.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate. Mr. President, allow me at the outset to extend my thanks to Mr. Tijani Mohammed Bandi for his distinguished efforts as President of the General Assembly of the United Nations during its previous session. I would like to wish you, Mr. President, success in conducting the work of the current session objectively and wisely. Mr. President, the convening of the high-level segment of the current session garners particular importance this year as it coincides with the commemoration of the 75th anniversary of the establishment of the United Nations. It also comes at a time when the world is facing the novel COVID-19 pandemic. It has caused tragic human loss as well as a profound economic and social impact. Mr. President, Egypt, given its history, location, and given its African, Arab, Islamic, and Mediterranean affiliation, and as a founding member of the United Nations, has its own vision regarding the approach to be adopted to improve the performance and develop the effectiveness of the multilateral international system while paying special attention on the United Nations. I would like to take this opportunity to go over some of the measures that could help us achieve our common goals in the 3 UN pillars. The first pillar, regarding maintaining international peace and security. It is imperative for all of us to adopt an approach that guarantees the implementation of resolutions adopted within the multilateral system. Priority should be given to the implementation of the well-established rules and principles of international law, which are enshrined in the Charter. This requires political will on behalf of member states to respect and implement such resolutions and enhance the United Nations on 2 main fronts. 1, the need to diligently follow up on the implementation of what had been agreed upon and take all necessary measures to assist states in implementing their obligations and building their capacities while taking into account the principle of national ownership. Second, the need to hold states that deliberately breach international law and UN resolutions accountable, especially resolutions of the Security Council. In this context, it is no longer acceptable for binding Security Council resolutions which deal with counterterrorism and which provide a legal framework for combating this deadly scourge to remain without implementation and without full commitment by some member states, which believe that they will not be held accountable for political reasons. It is regrettable that the international community continues to turn a blind eye to a number of states that provide support to terrorists, whether by funds and weapons or by providing a safe haven to them and political and media platforms. They also facilitate the transfer of terrorist fighters to conflict zones, especially Libya and Syria, before it. Egypt's interest in upholding international peace and security include protecting people from the scourge of armed conflict through launching comprehensive political processes based on relevant Security Council resolutions. In Libya, for example, Egypt continues to adhere to the political resolution process led by the United Nations based on the Sukhayrat Agreement, the outcome of the Berlin Conference, and the Cairo Declaration, subscribed to by both the Speaker of the Libyan House of Representatives and the Commander-in-Chief of the Libyan National Army. The Cairo Declaration serves as a joint comprehensive political initiative to end the conflict in Libya, including a set of precise steps and a clear schedule aiming at restoring the political system and instituting a consensual Libyan government that lives up to the aspirations of the Libyan people. The ramifications of the ongoing crisis are not only confined to Libya, but also spill over to affect security in neighboring countries and international stability. Egypt is bent on supporting Libyans to rid their country of armed militias and terrorist organizations, and put an end to the blatant interference of some regional parties that deliberately transported foreign fighters to Libya in an effort to fulfill their well-known greed and long-standing colonial illusions. Hence, as we have declared before and we reiterate today, any breach to the line extending between the towns of Sirte and Gifra, previously demarcated as a red line, will be fiercely faced by Egypt in defense of its people and its national security. We also renew our call to all parties to return to the political process, aiming at restoring peace, security, and stability deserved by the people of Libya. If we truly wish to implement international resolutions and maintain and restore peace and security in the Middle East, no issue would be more worthy of our attention than the issue of Palestine, whose people still strive to their most basic human right to live in a free and independent state along with its neighbors in the region. Generations of Palestinians have strived to achieve this right, and a multitude of resolutions elapsed ever since, to no avail, putting a heavy strain on human conscience. To keep the prospects of peace alive and to achieve cooperation and coexistence, we must fulfill the legitimate aspirations of the Palestinian people in an independent state with East Jerusalem as its capital, for peace and security to prevail in the region. The international community has an obligation to honor its commitment to achieve the long-awaited peace and address any measures that eat up at Palestinian lands and undermine the two-state solution as stipulated in international resolutions and the basis of the peace process initiated by Egypt to achieve a just, comprehensive, and durable peace. In Syria, a comprehensive political solution has become a necessity in order to put out the raging war and implement all the components of the political settlement outlined in Security Council Resolution 2254 in its entirety, in a manner that preserves the unity of Syria, its territorial integrity, the integrity of its institutions, fulfills the aspirations of its people, and terminates all forms of terrorism. It is also high time for a firm stand in Yemen to put an end to the ongoing crisis there, in accordance with UN Security Council Resolution 2216, the GCC initiative, and the outcome of the comprehensive national dialogue, and in a manner that upholds legitimacy, guarantees Yemen's unity and independence, and puts an end to using Yemen as a launching pad targeting its neighbors and obstructing the free navigation in the Strait of Bab el-Mandab. Mr. President, with regards to the Renaissance Dam matter, I wish to seize this opportunity to convey to you the mounting concerns of the Egyptian people regarding this project currently being constructed by a neighboring and friendly country which shares a river that has provided life to millions of people for thousands of years. We have spent the better part of a decade in tiresome negotiations with our brothers in the Sudan and Ethiopia, through which our aim was to reach an agreement on the filling and operation of the dam, an agreement that strikes the requisite balance between the development needs of the friendly Ethiopian people and the preservation of Egypt's water interest and its right to life. Throughout this year, we have undertaken successive rounds of intense negotiations in which the United States government exerted much appreciated efforts to bring the positions of the three countries closer through the talks it sponsored for several months with the World Bank. Egypt also engaged in good faith in the deliberations initiated by my brother, the Prime Minister of the Sudan, and afterwards in the negotiations called for by the Republic of South Africa in its current capacity as chairperson of the African Union. Unfortunately, none of these efforts resulted in any tangible outcome. Indeed, the Nile River must not be monopolized by one state. For Egypt, the Nile water is an existential matter. This, however, does not mean that we want to undermine the rights of our brothers and sisters sharing with us the Nile basin. In this vein, the convening of the Security Council consultative meeting on the 29th of June of this year highlighted the importance of this issue and its direct bearing on international peace and security. The international community bears the responsibility to urge all parties to reach the desired agreement in a way that meets our mutual interests. Nevertheless, it is unacceptable for the negotiations to continue forever in an attempt to impose the realities on the ground, because our people yearn for stability and development towards a new promising era of cooperation. Mr. President, regarding the second pillar of the United Nations, achieving sustainable development, Egypt firmly believes that fostering development efforts is a fundamental precondition to enhance international peace and security and to establish a stable world order. This is paramount to prevent extremism, armed conflicts, and humanitarian crises. Egypt has supported the adoption of 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and carried out a vital role to support the efforts of the Secretary-General to reform the UN developmental system, because we believe in the importance of bolstering the organization's efforts to accomplish these optimistic objectives. The current profound crisis due to the novel COVID-19 pandemic mandates the world to provide support for developing countries through offering stimulating packages for their economies, reducing their accumulated debt liabilities, and utilizing the available instruments of the international financial institutions, aiming at contributing to creating a favorable environment for them. This would help developing countries contain the impact of the pandemic and deal with their already existing problems such as terrorism, disorderly migration, and treating the root causes of conflicts. Regarding the third pillar of the work of the United Nations, the International Agenda of Human Rights garners increased importance for its direct impact on strengthening human development and improving the level of services provided to people and to preserve human rights. This guarantees a decent life and the ability to deal with the challenges on all levels, which at the same time enhances the stability of the international system. In Egypt, we have embarked on strengthening our endeavor in human rights towards all political, economic, and social perspectives, with a belief in the necessity of their integration. in light of the Egyptian constitution and its amendments related to the basic rights and liberties as well as the rights of future generations. We have also re-established the Senate and its role in supporting the democratic system. Women also play an important role in our political system. They hold many decision-making positions. We have also worked on strengthening citizenship and achieving equality and equal opportunities without any discrimination. We also empowered Egyptian women, and we sought to combat all forms of violence against Egyptian women, calling for the reform of religious discourse, promoting citizenship as a principle that does not differentiate between compatriots. We also enabled people with special needs, and we invested in our youth by including them in the decision-making process. We also established direct dialogues with young people through periodic youth forums. We've also implemented training and qualification initiatives for young people to participate effectively in public work. At the economic level, and based on Egypt's 2030 vision, if it weren't for the support given by the Egyptian people to our institutions, we would have been unable to overcome this difficult period. Our national plan helped strengthen our economy and limit our losses due to the coronavirus pandemic. Egypt is among the few countries that were able to achieve positive growth rates despite this pandemic. We also controlled inflation rates and saw a decline in unemployment to its lowest levels in 20 years. We also implemented national projects in infrastructure. We provided decent housing and energy and provided social programs for people with low income. We have focused also on healthcare as a main right by adopting several initiatives. We also implemented the Universal Health Coverage Program for all citizens as part of our efforts to guarantee a decent life for all Egyptians. In the midst of all of the above, and without any propaganda or blackmail, I would like to point out that we have never failed in our humanitarian duty towards the nearly 5 million immigrants and refugees who were forced to leave their countries due to wars, political crises, and difficult economic conditions. Egypt is hosting them among the Egyptian people, where they enjoy all services provided by the state to Egyptian citizens without receiving any aid or any significant support from our international partners, despite the importance they attach to the rights of those immigrants. Mr. President, we must work on addressing the issue of equitable geographical representation in the Security Council in order to better reflect the realities of today's world and the current balance of power, which is very different from what it was during the formulation of the international system. Egypt stresses the importance of expanding the Council in both its permanent and non-permanent categories, which will enhance its credibility and achieve a fair representation of Africa to correct the historical injustice inflicted on it and address its legitimate demands enshrined in the Isolini Consensus and Sirte Declaration. Mr. President, to confront the grave challenges resulting from the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic, as well as existing regional and international problems. It is imperative for us to uphold the principle of international cooperation and solidarity to address these challenges and to avoid rivalry and polarization. If hope is born out of pain, then perhaps we will find in the current crisis what motivates us to breathe new life into our relentless efforts to enhance international multilateral action and the role of the United Nations as its driving force. Egypt, as a founding member of this organization, and given its contribution to human civilization since the dawn of history, it has spared no effort to achieve the vision of renewal and reform. This is based on a firm conviction that the world has room for us all, as long as relations between countries and peoples are governed by the abandonment of conflicts, peacemaking, and building an international cooperation in order to achieve development, security, and prosperity for both current and future generations. I thank you, Mr. President.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Arab Republic of Egypt for his statement.